My name is Robert Polacco. I'm 58 years old, and I was born and raised here in Las Vegas, New Mexico. My mother was a schizophrenic, a resident at the mental state hospital here in Las Vegas. My biological father was in prison, and he was brought for some forensic testing at the hospital. They got together. It was just a one-night stand. This is the hospital I was born in. Like I said, my mother was a patient at the mental hospital. They brought her here to give birth, and then they took her back. I became a ward of the state. I was placed in a foster home. According to the caseworker, I was being abused. I always felt like an outsider. I always felt like something was broken. And so I grew up with that just chip on my shoulder. Like there's no answers, and I felt there's no hope. So I got involved in the martial arts. I began to give myself to this. That became my new identity. I decided to open up my own dojo, my own class. And that's where I met my wife. I gave her free lessons because I thought she was pretty, and so ended up getting married immediately, having problems. My life was falling apart.
We all have the desire to be liked, but we also, especially if you're going to be a truth bringer, we're going to one day answer to God. You know, have I been faithful to preach? And Paul said this, the whole counsel of God. Jude, he was fully prepared to write to them, to talk about our common salvation, how great God is, how that serving him is life and that more abundantly. But he said, I found it necessary. There was a pivoting, a real compulsion to exhort you that you earnestly contend for the faith once delivered to the saints. And so he's saying you need to enter into the arena, the contest of struggling for and contending for the faith, and that is capital F, the faith. He's talking about a body of truth that has, first of all, been prophesied about. Secondly, it's been fulfilled in the person of Jesus Christ, and is not going to be revised 25, 100, 1,000 years from now. It is the faith. My conviction is that, hey, people's needs and people's hearts haven't changed. There's still an emptiness without God. There's still a lack of purpose to your life without Jesus. It boils down to something very simple. It's getting people to talk about Jesus. One beggar telling another beggar where to find bread. Just like Andrew went and found Peter, Philip going and finding Nathanael, the two women who were the first to arrive at the now empty tomb. The angel said, come and see and go and tell. See that the answer is only found in Christ, and then go and tell others the good news.
My memory of this church goes back to May 15th of 1981. Pastor Warner was reading the list of new church plants, and he said going into Las Vegas, New Mexico, we all thought to ourselves, he just put Las Vegas in New Mexico. It's not in New Mexico, Pastor Warner, it's in Nevada. And he, knowing our thoughts, answered the congregation and said, no, I said New Mexico because there is a Las Vegas, New Mexico. And so Pastor Warner put a couple here. They immediately began to outreach. They showed the big three, the three prophecy films that were very popular in those days. Robert and Jackie went to see the film, and they were both convicted by the message.
This is where we entered. This is the building where we got saved.
When I prayed that prayer that night, I just felt free.
I had had like an elephant's foot on me my whole life, and when I prayed that prayer, I got up, I felt that lifted from me. And obviously Robert too, because we looked at each other and there's a big smile on our faces, and we literally just felt free.
No desire to smoke dope. The alcohol desire was gone. When I went to class on Monday, I shut it all down. This thing is closed. You don't owe me any money. And I just felt brand new, like a brand new start, like a reset button. And I found something to live for, and that was Jesus.
Robert and Jackie proved to be a key couple in the forming of that early church here. It was a small church, but God began to do miracles in that little building. In time, Richard and Yolanda came in and took over the church. Richard had just turned 21 years old, and he looked younger than that.
Las Vegas Church was 2 years old. A great church. God was moving. There were things that were happening there. The city of Las Vegas is 14,000 people, and everybody knew Robert. He had a reputation.
They knew the old me. For them to see me now, they know I'm different. I always tell people when I got saved, crime went down about 10%. First it was just new convert. I'm happy to be saved. But now Richard is bringing another dimension, that of discipleship. He was so focused on reaching the lost and discipline. Prayer, punctuality, watching how he spoke, his passion for preaching, passion about God. I wanted to be more like him. I wanted to align myself. And I remember I talked to him and I said, I see you preaching and I want to take the microphone away from you and just do what you do. And he says, never lose that. That's God stirring you. I told the pastor, I don't think I have what it takes to do what you're doing. He said, Robert, right now you don't need what it takes. He says, when you step out and you go out, then God will give you what you need.
This is very common. People make Christianity all about there's certain behaviors, there's certain things expected of you that make you a Christian, and they get it backwards. I have to come to God and be saved and justified fully by His grace, and it's out of that the motivation. God said, I'm going to put in them a new heart, a heart that will keep my commandments, a heart that will know me. And He said, I'm going to forgive their sins. It's not that I have to serve God or do this or that. Now there is a want to, and there's also the power to. Belief leads and precedes behavior.
When Richard left to pioneer in Houston, my brother Fred and his wife Norma came in. And one of the things I greatly appreciate about what Fred did, it seems by nature he sees beyond limits. I was last July that I was at a Bible conference in Mexico City celebrating the 30th anniversary. In this building that the church had been using now for 30 years, it was an old wrestling hall. It occurred to me that the reason why at our 40th anniversary this church is a conference center is because of what happened in 1991 in a church that was not yet 10 years old, and my brother Fred, who was not yet 30 years old. He was a young man in a young church in a very small town. And yet he got it into his head that he could plant a church in another nation. He had just completed this building. He had a vision, and it seemed impossible, but he spoke this vision to the people, and the people got behind him. They supported it. There were times when it seemed the work would come to a halt, and Fred would be stressing over it. I think he lost years, he lost hair, weight, but he pushed through, and it wasn't long after that, he had a young couple, Gary and Lisa Case, And Fred just decided, I'm going to drop back 7 steps and throw the ball as far as I can and see what God will do. And God saw that. He launched this church into a trajectory, not understanding at the time that was in the spiritual. Those teenagers are now pastors. Many of them are pastors and pastors' wives. They're the pillars of this church. And so when my wife and I took over in 1997, we just simply had to get on a horse that was already galloping. It's an amazing thing to see what God has done.
I've been in the same church for 40 years. These men have been a great reference point for myself, for my wife, my family. Pastor Ray, presently my pastor, the greatest example of a Christian that I know. I always say when I grow up, I want to be just like him.
When I took over the church, the door opened for Robert and Jackie to go into Johannesburg to pioneer a church. They settled in an area called Eden Park. They set up a tent on a vacant lot. They just simply did what we do. He would challenge these people to honor God with the tithe. He also made clear moral stands, especially when it came to ministry. But in time, it all paid off. God began to bless those people. And God began to establish a church there so that if you go back to that place today, what you find on the very same spot where that tent was on the dirt is now a church building. There's a thriving congregation. They planted, I believe, 5 churches, maybe more, and the township's still there. But in the midst of that, God has done this incredible miracle.
We were about to go to South Africa. Friends and family were concerned, and they asked us, "Are you taking your kids?" I said, "Absolutely, they're our kids." But when we went, it did something in our family that I don't think would have happened anywhere else, and ended up spending almost 17 years of our life in Africa.
They also served in the Cape Verde Islands off the coast of Africa, and they then went to take the pastorate of a church in Cape Town, a church planting center there.
We love being overseas. We love doing that, just making our lives count and planting our lives somewhere, just seeing the word of God resonate in people's hearts and lives and see them respond to the gospel. That's amazing. It's addicting. I don't think we've had any happier times than being overseas. Just the memories. That's all we talk about, my wife and I. We sit down, we just talk. I do it again and again and again. It's still not out of the possibilities.
All of these things, whether it's contending for the faith, a doctrinal soundness as opposed to progressive Christianity, the habits of faith, which is the personal building up of ourselves, all of them are intended to lead to the mission of the church, which is to go and make disciples in all nations. There should in all of us be a willingness. God, use my life, because if He's Lord, what would you have me to do? There's a wave coming. The revival that we've talked about, we've prayed about. But if you're sitting on the beach, just hanging out, you're gonna miss that. You gotta paddle, you gotta make your way out. You have to watch for the wave, and God, when that wave comes, help us, please, to catch that.
We must not lose our projection and our goal for evangelism and church planting. God is blessing our churches, it's blessing our pastors, our ministries, and many of our churches are becoming large and powerful congregations. However, our ministry and church planting did not begin with large churches. It began when our churches were small And we dare not lose the understanding that God has called us not to grow large churches, but God has called us to evangelize, God has called us to plant churches, and we have discovered that out of small congregations, there can be a participation in world evangelism, there can be a participation in church planting and disciple making, and we dare not lose the vision that God gives to us. And my challenge to the fellowship is that we not lose the perspective that we have, but our vision, our challenge is world evangelism from churches of any size and from churches of very small resource. God's given us the opportunity, the call, the responsibility, and the challenge to rise up and do that work that God's called us to do.